Hello, BookTube. I went back to the Brattle bookshop this morning. I know that will seem unbelievable to some of you since I was just there the other day, but the place is inexhaustible. And my fellow booktuber, J. Scott Phillips, was in Boston and wanted to meet at the Brattle. He can attest now firsthand that the place is inexhaustible. So I went, we met. It was a beautiful, early summer morning. Not a hint of chill or cold anywhere, but not yet oppressively hot. And it was weekend. I don't usually go to the Brattle on the weekends, but I made an exception in this case, as I will, I hope, for most of you who come into town to visit. And I got a pile of books. And I wanted to show them to you. We'll start off with, unlike last time, this time I did get some paperbacks. And there's a lot of booktube cross-pollination involved here. A lot. This comes in all kinds of forms. I'm sure that you've experienced it yourself. If you're a viewer of booktube, or God forbid, a content creator on booktube, you've probably experienced it yourself, where suddenly you are no longer alone in your head when you're looking at books, when you're browsing for books. Suddenly, you have 1,000 voices that have recommended things of one kind or another. And you might not remember where the recommendation comes from, but it's sticking there in your mind. Suddenly you're thinking, ooh, I wouldn't have thought of this book. But now I am thinking about it. That happened in this case as well. And the first four books are little mass market paperbacks here, and it's not going to take you any time at all to guess the origin of what prompted me to pick these things up. I have only one thing to say in my own defense, but we'll get to that. The first one is At the Earth's Core. Edgar Rice Burroughs with this fantastic Frank Frazetta cover. That is a Thipdar on the cover there. And this is a story of an adventure into the hollow earth, into the land inside the earth with a sun of its own. Which, despite the fact that Edgar Rice Burroughs was popularizing crackpot pseudoscience from 2 centuries earlier, there are people today who believe this is true. But anyway, the Pellucidar books are great. I also got Savage Pellucidar with, once again, a fantastic cover there. That is just unbelievable. In these little mass market paperbacks, I don't have a normal size mass market paperback to compare, but normal size mass markets were a little bigger. I also found The Moon Maid, which is a part of it's a strange series of books by Edgar Rice Burroughs that I really need to go back and reread. I'll start with I don't think The Moon Maid is the first one. It doesn't matter. I'll start with the first one and go on from there. I'm pretty sure I have them all as ebooks. And then finally, The Lost Continent, with our hero facing off against lions. Lions are a big deal in this book, but it doesn't take place in darkest Africa. And it also is weird and overlooked when it comes to Edgar Rice Burroughs' work. I found all 4 of those. And of course, when you hear the words Edgar Rice Burroughs, you think of Michael K. Vaughan. Yes, because he is working his way through the works of Edgar Rice Burroughs and has just recently been talking about Pellucidar. So I saw those. I don't have any of them as paperbacks, and for instance, when it comes to the Pellucidar books, I wouldn't want a Pellucidar book that didn't look like this. So I grabbed all 4 of those. Then we have a paperback of the writer J.F. Powers, who might be familiar to some of you as the author of a really good novel. I think it won him a major award. It was his debut novel, Mort d'Urban, about a suburban priest. The last place in the world that you would think you could get a really moving, funny, touching novel, and yet the whole thing about fiction, the whole wonder of it, is it can go where you don't expect to find a story, and find a story. I might point out that it never really seemed all that possible that there was a great story in the American whaling industry. You don't know where it's going to happen. But Mort d'Urban was his first novel, but it wasn't his first work of fiction. This was Prince of Darkness and Other Stories, which was brought out again by the Hogarth Press. This was his debut work, a collection of short stories that I haven't read in forever, just forever. Can't wait to try these again. That is just fantastic to get this. And while we're on the subject of fiction debuts, I also got another fiction debut, mainly because I love this format. I am slowly but surely accumulating this format of this author whenever I see them, even though, again, I have all of these on my Kindle. I have all of these as ebooks. But this is Call for the Dead by John le Carré. And you're not going to be able, they're very nice cover designs, but they also have the sunken letters in gold boss there. You're not really going to be able to appreciate how nice these editions are on camera. You'd have to see it, but I grab them when I see them now, especially since, well, I would have grabbed this anyway, but just the other night, I've mentioned before on this channel that I set up my night's reading. I read all day as well. I do some writing, but since I'm the fastest pen east of the Pecos, I don't need to agonize with a large amount of writing time. So I do a lot of reading during the day, but I also set up my reading for the night. The nighttime is when the baby bean, she's right here. She's right here next to me. The nighttime is when the baby bean doesn't need me anymore. She doesn't need me for anything. She just wants to sleep. And when nobody else does either. There are no publicists at their desks. There are no editors with one more thing or circling back or anything like that. There's no neighborhood fuss of any kind. I am settled. Most of my needs are taken care of. So I've got a huge stretch of reading time there that most of you are using to turn into protoplasmic blobs on your pillows. And I set up my reading ahead of time, hoping that the mix that I pick will please me. And some of the thing that I add to that mix almost every night is a reread. And I don't know why, but for some reason, the other night I picked Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy by John le Carré. And I had just recently read The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. So I'm not reading these in any kind of systematic way, but boy, oh boy, I know I'm late to the party here, and I appreciated this author even when he was writing his books, but I am seeing a lot more here. He has always had a very vocal subset of critics who say this is not just run-of-the-mill spy fiction. This is a serious author who happens to be working in this genre. Much the same way that people said the same thing about Patrick O'Brian. They said this isn't just nautical, swashbuckling, seafaring adventure fiction. This is a serious author who happens to be working in that vein. I saw that at the time. I've never argued with that when it comes to John le Carré, but boy, oh boy. I've read those two books recently, and I got this one today. This was his premiere, his debut, and this was also the first appearance of George Smiley. And I haven't read this in forever, so the double whammy there. I have this as an ebook, but this will probably be on the pile for rereading fairly soon as I work my way through John le Carré. Then we have an author that we've seen on this channel before, and this is a demonstration of a principle that works at the Brattle. Sometimes when you are at the Brattle, especially in the sale lot, those of you who've never been to the Brattle bookshop, they have a sale lot next door to the store proper that has thousands of books that are separated. They're organized only by price, $1, $3, and $5. And so you never know what you're going to find out there. And nothing's going to be together or in order or systematized in any way. If you go into the shop, for instance, and you go to the fiction wall, for instance, and you're looking for, let's say, Dance to the Music of Time, 4 volumes of Dance to the Music of Time. Well, if the shop has any volumes of Dance to the Music of Time, they're all going to be together right there. That isn't true out in the sale lot. And I have found over the years that I've been going there that one of the things that it helps sometimes to do at the Brattle is to sort of propitiate the gods of the Brattle sale lot by getting something, the one item of a set that is shown to you in hopes is sort of a down payment on seeing the rest of them. Now, it doesn't make any sense to do unless the work you're getting is all of its own right important to you, interesting to you. Since he's $1 a piece, it doesn't take much to attract my interest. What I'm talking about in that huge preamble is this thing. Who does this? John Murray. This is a UK trade paperback of James Lee Mills' diaries from 1982 to 1984. This volume is called Holy Dread. Lovely thing there with the French flaps. He did like 10 volumes of diaries. He's an incredible diarist. And they all came out from John Murray in these editions. I'm sure that there is a set of these somewhere on eBay or something like that. Of course, I don't really want to get them as a set on eBay. I really want to find them. This was, as far as I could see, the only one out in the sale lot. And this illustrates the principle that I'm talking about because I very much love reading this guy. Absolutely love reading him. Anyway, even if this were the only volume that I ever find. But in addition to that, I grabbed it. I plunked my $1 for it because, as a sign of earnest to the Brattle gods, that maybe I should have the other volumes as well. In other words, I mean, how would I think about myself if I left this behind, went back in a week and it was gone, and then went back in 3 weeks and all the other volumes were there except this one? That would mean that they were all bought as a set at the same time, and one of them got dislodged from the other in the process of going into boxes and going into the basement, then coming up to the pricing table and getting priced and going out to the sale lot. One of them got dislodged from the others. That can easily happen, and I would have a missing number. So I grabbed this. This will be enjoyable to read anyway. But this author has come up before. I think we saw his Roman Knights, which was his impressions of Rome. And at the time, I think I went on a little bit describing him. He was a fascinating figure, beloved by everybody, and romantically, let's just say, involved with a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of people in the Bloomsbury set and in the government of the time and whatnot. You never knew with James Lees Miller, you never knew when you were talking years and years later with some old gray-haired figure, an ex-prime minister or a grand man of letters or a grand woman of letters or the matron of some country house with her lord off fighting the war or whatever. No matter who you were talking to in a circumstance like that, no matter what, there was always a chance, male or female, young or old, rich or poor, famous or obscure, there was always a chance in that conversation that they would tear up a little, look off to the side and say, he was such a wonderful lover. So of course I want to read this guy's diaries. I haven't. I read through the whole set once at a library. But I really like these John Murray trade paperbacks, so here's hoping. We shall see. The one volume is good enough for me, even if I don't find any others. Then we have a great novel of the 20th century, the second half of the 20th century. The second half of the 20th century is an odd canon. It's not really forming, or if it is, it's forming just in terms of dude bro acclamation, when it really shouldn't. There are lots of other of us who read fiction other than just dude bros. Cormac McCarthy should not be anywhere near that list. And instead, when people talk about, the canon of the second half of the 20th century, post-war 20th century, when people talk about that, usually they talk about all the wrong people. They talk about all the wrong books that may have been popular but are not serious literature. Routinely, when that subject comes up, I'll hear people talk about Cormac McCarthy, first of all, who hasn't written a good book ever. But also in that conversation will come up The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I have nothing against that book, but for Pete's sake, we're talking about a literary canon here, the greatest works of literature that come out of that time period. That canon has been slow to form. I really ought to just form it myself. I mean, if 5,000 dude bros all clamoring together in between pre-workout hits can halfway form a canon on their own just without meaning to, surely I can form one by making one on my own and telling people this is what it is. Anyway, this is one of those books, and I found it today out of an old Waterstones bookmark. Oh my goodness gracious! 26 Exeter Street. Yes, indeed. There was a big, beautiful Waterstones bookstore on Exeter Street in a gorgeous old building, and then it burned. Fires just jetting out of the windows on 2 or 3 different floors, and it was almost gutted, and they, bless them for their pluck, they brought out T-shirts saying, "We will be back," but they were never back. But this is the Three Arch Bridge, and this is a historical novel about the building of a bridge in the the 14th century. And again, like I mentioned with uh, suburban priests in America, suburban Catholicism in America, or the American whaling industry, you never know where you're going to find a great story. I believe this is the greatest thing this author has ever done. That I've read anyway. I've read everything he's written in English, largely based on my exhilaration at this book. So I was happy to find a hardcover. It would definitely be in that canon, but what about that canon? I mean, honestly, what about that canon? I mean, I hear the Secret History mentioned, but never, for instance, The Year of Silence by Madison Smart Bell, Fiscadoro by Dennis Johnson. These things never get mentioned. So I don't. It bothers me that when the subject of a post-war 20th century American or fictional canon comes up, I shouldn't be hearing Haruki Murakami's name. I'm sorry. I like some of his books, but I shouldn't be hearing his name. He's not even close to being in the running. I guess the canons are not set by me. I guess it will be usage and familiarity and all sorts of vague currents like that will set a canon. It's not a pure meritocracy. But anyway, sorry for the long digression. Then we have a work of history. This is Samuel Hines. This is A War Imagined, where he looks at the way the 1920s imagined World War One. Also, the way the war years imagined World War One as it was happening. The way it became, this is very similar to Paul Fussell's book, The Great War on the Popular Imagination. This is very much not a history of World War One, even the conclusion of World War One. It's more a social study of what people did with this thing that caught everyone by surprise and churned up a whole generation into meat. And then suddenly it was over. It came out of nowhere, burst like a thundercloud, ground into this seemingly endless thing, this seemingly endless piece of bloody attrition, and then ended. And unlike a lot of wars before and since, I would argue that one of the reasons that World War I worked on the popular imagination, social imagination, the ways that it did, is because none of the aspects of it made any sense. None did. None were anything like any war that had come before, and no one knew what to do with those aspects. Wars used to happen from long grievance. This did not. It was a domino chain of events that caused it to burst into being. Wars used to be a matter of charges and breakthroughs and seized flags. This was not. It was all of the killing and mire and mud and terror of war and loss, telegraphs sent back to widows, but without any of those landmarks of actual battles. And it just sort of ended. It just sort of ended. Everybody's still here. Kingdoms ended, but it's an odd thing. It's not like World War II was very different. It was very different on all of those fronts. And I would argue that most other wars have been. So, and I remember I read this when it first came out. This came out in the early 90s, I want to say. 1990. I read it when it first came out, and it got widely reviewed, but I haven't read it since then. And I've read a lot on World War II since then. Then our next one is another BookTube, book buying under the influence of BookTube, because I watch a lot of BookTube. I watch a lot of channels. And I watch people discuss books. I watch people say, I'm still working my way through this thing, and oh my God, it's beating me at every turn. I watch people give reviews of books. They review a book that they've just read, or they just react to it. And I want to stress, I know it's off topic again, but that's the nature of this video, I guess. I want to stress that all of those things work, right? All of those things work. BookTube is not a ratings game. It is not a performance measure. It's that you set up a camera, any kind of camera, simply talk to me about the books in your life right now. You don't need to have made any kind of progress from last week. You just need to tell me what you think about it. That's all. This is not a contest. You don't have to say I finished 6 books this week or 10 books this week or whatever. And your reviews don't have to be, crystalline, organized things. They don't have to be formal in any way. This is not a formal book review space. So you can just hold up the book and talk about what you thought about it. That's all. which, contrary to you naysayers out there, is not what a book review is. But anyway, this is a book that is like that. I saw a booktuber. I think his name is Micah Cummins. He did a review of this book. And I remember when I was watching his review, I was thinking, I might have even said it out loud, that, boy, I never see that out in the wild. I saw a copy, I think I hauled it on this channel, probably 5 years ago, something like that. I haven't seen a single copy since. And then I spotted one today and grabbed it. It's this. It's We the Drowned. A big, and I don't know, if I remember, I'll leave a link to Micah's video, but this is a fantastic novel. Just fantastic. This came out, when? 2006. And would definitely be, as long as we're on the tedious subject, this would definitely be on the top, on the list of a 21st century fictional canon. It's just a magnificent, sprawling saga of the sea and the people who vie with it for their life, their livelihood, center of their meaning. It's full of stories, just full of stories. And as you can tell from the title, it's a comparatively rare and I think very successful exhibition of how you narrate a book in the first person plural. Some writers try that. It usually doesn't work. But in this case, in order for it to really work, you need a kind of unanimity on the part of the chorus, and you never get that. If you get that, you've failed at character making. But this definitely works. I haven't read this since I hauled it. I think I hauled it about 5 years ago on this channel, something like that. I've recommended it a couple of times, but now that I've seen Micah review it, I will certainly be reading it again now that I found a copy. I forget what happened to my last copy. I think if I did it on this channel, then I think somebody probably saw it and said, oh my God, I live in a book desert. I'm never going to see that. Could you send it to me? And then these last two are fairly ornate. I've got a little bit of a landslide going on here, but these last two are fairly ornate. They are old, beautiful things. These came out, I want to say 100 years ago. Oh my God, you're so delicate. Oh, this is going to be such a trial to get these to live, because I am fairly hard on my books. I will be really careful with these. What have we got for a date? Do we have any kind of a date here? Let's see here. Well, over 100 years ago, anyway. These are both by Thomas Oakey, who was let's just say, a lover of all things Italian, and leave it at that. That works perfectly fine. Loved Dante, for instance. Could talk Dante endlessly. Has never had a biography, as far as I know. Probably doesn't have collected letters anywhere or anything like that. But he did 2 books on Venice. 2 beautiful, heavily illustrated books on Venice. And those of you who might be new to the channel, I love the city of Venice. I lived there. I didn't just visit as a tourist for 3 days. I lived there in all its seasons and fell in love with the place. It is the city on earth that I love, second only to Boston. I think about, the road not taken, because I lived there long term with a wonderful old woman who was my landlady and a whole bunch of dogs in a really weird apartment. My apartment climbed shallow steps up along the outside perimeter of the circular side of a building, and so it was a layout like no other living space that I've ever had. And looking back on the road not taken, this was a long, long time ago, and I look back on that and I think, when I hinted to her that it was time for me to move on, that I was missing Boston, that I was missing the Brattle, when I hinted to her that it was time to move on, she was pretty upset by that. And because we'd become good friends, I'd become a kind of son. And, not to slander the dead, but I really didn't have much in the way of competition from her own children. I was happy to sit with her while she was shelling beans and just listen to stories. I was happy to do that. And I loved seeing the little girl that she must have been once upon a time, a long, long time ago. I loved to see that little girl come peeking out when she saw the antics of my dogs. She had been initially very, very hesitant to take on a lodger who had dogs, especially a lodger who had so many dogs, and especially a lodger who, because I had my beagles, I had my boys, but I also, wherever I traveled, if I was going to set down roots, I gathered stray dogs to me. They were going to live with me while I was there as well, not just my boys. So it was a crowd of dogs, and not only was there a crowd of dogs that got her suspicions up right away, but also I made it clear they're going to live with me. They're not going to spend any time outside. They're going to live with me in my rooms. I'll feed them there, and there will be no messes. There will be no noise. There will be no trouble at all. You'll be the best protected house anywhere in the city, but there won't be any trouble at all. But I won't hear of. I mean, there was a tiny little yard. There was a slightly bigger garden. I told her I won't hear of putting them out there. That they're with me the whole time. I overcame her reluctance to do that largely by offering to pay 6 months of rent ahead of time all at once. But it was wonderful to see her come out of that reserve and the purely innocent little girl smile on her face when she would see my boys being clowns or acting up or whatever. The road not taken is that at the end of that stay, when I was starting to feel the end to move on, I got the distinct impression, I could be wrong, I got the distinct impression that if I had pushed the point, or suggested it even, she would have sold me that property on the agreement that she gets to live there till she dies. And I sometimes think about that. I think, I loved the place, absolutely loved it. Totally different kind of love, but I loved it. And it'd be pretty nice to be a property owner in Venice now. No one at the time knew what was going to happen to Venice, how hyper commercialized it was going to get. God only knows. I'm sure that apartment that I lived in doesn't exist in the form that I lived in it. I'm sure that it's been cut up so that each floor that it was sort of circumventing, each floor probably gets that side now. God only knows. Or maybe not. It takes practically an act of divine intervention to get permission to do any kind of reconstruction in Venice. So maybe not. But anyway, I love the city, and I'm never going to be back. I'm never going to see it again. So now I read about it. And I found one of Oki's books on Venice. Can you make that out there? The old Venetian palaces and old Venetian folk. It still has the gold highlighting there, and this is a big old book. I can't convey again how heavy this is, but it is full of illustrations, full color paintings, and also let's get them. Oh, look at that! Just incredible. This whole thing is full of those. This will have sewn binding. So this will last. Oh, yeah, here we go. It also has black and white illustrations in there as well. Just incredible. I think I read this out of a library eons ago, and have always kind of wanted a copy. And one time years ago, I saw a copy of this at the Brattle. It wasn't in good shape at all. It had been beaten to pieces. The boards were coming off it. You really wouldn't have been able to read it. I have a feeling that somebody probably snatched it up in order to take out the illustrations, make little framed, wall hangings of them and sell them that way. You could easily do that. But I passed on that volume. Not only because it was in fairly dodgy shape, but because I knew that if I got that volume, I would spend the rest of my life looking for the other volume that Oki wrote about Venice. That I would look for that volume forever. And that it would just be a source of headache, so I didn't do it. But I found that today, and I grabbed it because I found the other book that he wrote on Venice. How incredible. I found the other book. I now have both of these things together. Let's see here. Oh, this says that it's from the library of the Reverend Francis Gerard Shea. Probably a Boston Jesuit of some kind or other. These books tend not to stray far from home. This has black and white sketches. Do we have any color in here? How incredible. Oh, these are going to be so much. Oh, yeah, there is color. There's a fisherman, taken from life, but he and his son, long dead, long gone by now. There's some color artwork there, and also details of architecture just out of John Ruskin. And something just fell out of this. I did not notice this when I was getting it. A map. Oh my God! It's as soft as cheesecloth. This is a 120-year-old map. Oh, incredible! Oh, incredible! Oh, how wonderful! How wonderful! And if you dig down deep in here, you will get to where I lived. Fantastic! All right, so this has a map that is intact. Amazing, just amazing. Okay, so those were the last two. I didn't mean this to go. I had one digression after another in this. These were, of course, the find of the day. I found both of these things. So I didn't get the one and pine for the other. Instead, I found them both. So two grand old volumes on Venice. I'll be very careful with them. I don't want to destroy these things. I'm very hard on my books. Two grand old volumes of Venice that I can just live in. I can just live in these things. Fantastic. Then I found We the Drowned, which I got because Mike Cummins said that if I didn't get it, I was a soy boy cuck. I found War Imagined by Sam Hines. I found The Three Arch Bridge. It was going to be a joy to reread. I found one volume of James Lee Mills' diaries. Just one out of 10 or 12 or whatever, however many there are. Hoping to find others. I found Call for the Dead in these lovely paperback editions. I found Prince of Darkness by J.F. Powers. Hoping that down the line I find a copy of Mort Durbin. That would be great. Haven't read that in forever. It really is a charming book. And then a whole bunch of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Older, pulpier Edgar Rice Burroughs with Frank Frazetta covers. That you don't often see those, or at least I don't. And so I found them all and just grabbed them, even though I probably have ebooks of them, but it doesn't matter. So there you go. That was a Brattle book haul. On a beautiful Saturday morning, saw a bunch of old cronies, had a great time talking, had a great time meeting J. Scott Phillips, and then hurried back here to my bean. So I know I said this last time just a few days ago, but I doubt I'll be back to the Brattle until next week. Well, obviously, since they're not open tomorrow. But I don't need any more books. How can I say that, though, looking at this pile? There are some things on here. The sweepstakes for what makes it into the little book room for the night's readings, oh my. Those sweepstakes are mighty crowded tonight. I have a novel. I don't want to just swear off contemporary fiction, although it almost never pleases me. I don't want to swear off it, and I'm not 100%. I have this thing. And it's lovely. It's got fantastic end papers. Look at that. You just never see care like that. But the fact that the end papers look that way leads me to believe that this is actually just a memoir of an ancestor of the author, and that the author is calling it a novel just because it's just a lie. Where everything in it is documented, everything in it is factual, everything in it actually happened and can be traced to actual documented events, but you can't call it a novel because nobody reads memoirs. Sorry to report that kind of just bald-faced lying has become common in the publishing industry in the 21st century, where someone will pull the material for a manuscript entirely from their visible social media feeds, quotes and everything. Won't change any names of anybody, including themselves. Slap it all together into a relatively coherent, although formless, narrative, and then call that a novel. That is not a novel. You did not invent anything. So, but I don't know. That might not be the case. It might be the author, seriously trying to reimagine what the lives of those characters were. But that's pretty weak tea when measured against this, or when measured against either of Oki's Venice books. So who knows what will win that sweepstakes tonight? There'll have to be new stuff. It won't just be, for instance, it won't just be that novel. It will also be this. This is an intellectual memoir by Peter Brown. I've been waiting for this thing literally since the middle of the 20th century. So I'm obviously not going to pass that up. The things like that will be in the running as well. But a Brattle Hall always throws a monkey wrench in there because there are a lot of things here that are calling to me. We'll see. Oftentimes I make a prediction of which one will follow me into the little book room, and I'm wrong. We shall see. I will report back. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.